try to keep something between you and your target.
Did you know that Tom Moore, one of the most beloved characters from Mountain Men, has a life story that goes beyond the show? What happened to him after he left? In this video, you'll learn about Tom Moore's journey after Mountain Men, including his lifestyle changes and what he's been up to since leaving the series. After leaving the show, many fans wondered what challenges Tom faced in adapting to life outside the spotlight and how he continued his passion for living off the land. To millions of people, Tom Moore is the real deal. He's the quintessential mountain man, a living link to a time gone by. Through the History Channel's hit show Mountain Men, we got a front-row seat to his world in the remote Yaak Valley of Montana, a place where survival is a full-time job and convenience is a word you don't hear much. We watched him and his wife, Nancy, build a life from scratch, staring down brutal winters, tracking game, and living a life of self-sufficiency most of us can only dream of. He became this quiet hero we all admired for his incredible strength, his deep knowledge of the wild, and an authenticity you just can't fake. He wasn't just some character on TV, he was a connection to a more honest way of living. For millions, Tom Moore is the ultimate mountain man, a symbol of rugged independence. But the toughest challenges he ever faced weren't caught on camera. Beyond the wilderness he mastered, there's a devastating personal tragedy that would have broken almost anyone. This is the untold story of the heartbreaking loss that truly defines the man we thought we knew, long before the quiet of the Montana mountains, and way before any TV cameras were following him around. Tom Moore's life was a mix of chaos, adrenaline, and pure, raw danger. His story doesn't start in the snow-covered wilderness, but in the flatlands outside Rockford, Illinois, where the spirit of the Wild West wasn't just a place, it was in his blood. Born in 1943, Tom was the son of Chike Orr, a man who lived a life straight out of an adventure novel. Chike was a performer in the legendary Wild West shows that toured the country, putting on incredible displays of horsemanship and daring. This was the world Tom was born into, a world of horses, skill, and an unspoken rule that life was meant to be lived on the edge. His father was a true horseman and passed that love down to Tom and his older brother, Jack. They could ride almost before they could walk. By the time Tom was just 7, his dad was teaching him trick riding, doing acrobatics on the back of a running horse. It was a crazy hobby for a kid, but for Tom, it was just life. It lit a fire in him, a taste for the thrill that would stick with him for years. That taste for danger soon found a new home. The rodeo. At only 15, Tom was hooked. In a move that tells you everything you need to know about his spirit, his mom drove him to the edge of town, where he stood with nothing but his bull rope and rigging bag. He hitchhiked all the way to Ohio, dead set on making a name for himself riding bucking broncs and angry bulls. Just picture it, a teenager heading out, not with fear, but with total confidence, chasing after adventure. His mother's quiet support said it all. She knew her son was never going to live a normal life. The rodeo circuit in the 1960s was a brutal, unforgiving place. It was a traveling show of grit and guts, where men gambled their bodies against 1,000-pound animals for a little cash and a moment of glory. Tom jumped in with both feet. He wasn't just showing up, he was a serious contender. He climbed the ranks of the International Rodeo Association and got a reputation as a champion rider known for being impossibly tough. He was consistently in the finals, his name always listed among the top 10 bull riders of the time. He lived on the road, sleeping wherever he could and surviving on the small prize money from a sport that took everything and promised nothing. This was where he proved himself, living life in 8-second bursts, where the line between winning and disaster was paper thin. For almost 20 years, Tom danced with death in arenas all over the country. He rode bulls for 18 years and horses for 25, a career that was as long as it was punishing. The physical toll was massive. Every ride was another chance for an injury, another blow to his body that he would feel for the rest of his life. His knees, especially, took a beating, something Nancy would often mention on Mountain Men years later. But the biggest price was paid on Valentine's Day in 1970. Inside a packed arena, a 35-year-old Tom got on top of a massive bull named Woolly Bugger. He did his usual routine, locking his hand into the rope for a better grip, but that also meant he was tied to the beast. The second the chute gate flew open, it was pure chaos. In a violent surge of power, Tom's head slammed into the bull's skull. He was knocked out cold, instantly. But the ride wasn't over. For 2 terrifying minutes, his limp body was dragged and thrown around the arena, his hands still trapped. His legs got caught under the bull's powerful hind legs, and he was stepped on again and again as the animal bucked wildly. The crowd watched in horror. But for Nancy, who was there in the stands, it was a moment of absolute terror. She could only watch, helpless, as her husband was brutalized. It was, she later said, the most terrifying moment of her life. When rescuers finally cut him free, Tom was carried out on a stretcher. He was unconscious for 3 hours. When he woke up, he was covered in bruises and had a severe concussion. He survived, but it was a serious wake-up call. In a weird twist, the bull, Woolly Bugger, died 2 weeks later. Tom would later joke, with that twinkle in his eye, "I think I gave him a concussion, too." Even though he was back in the rodeo a month later, something had changed. The magic was gone. He wasn't winning like he used to, and the near-death experience hung over him. The arenas that once felt like home now just felt risky. He knew it was time to get out. In 1981, Tom retired from the rodeo, closing the book on a life of crowds, dust, and danger. He had proven he was tough, but now he was looking for something else. He was looking for peace. The end of Tom's rodeo career wasn't the end of his adventure, it was the beginning of a new one. The man who spent decades chasing adrenaline in loud arenas was now looking for a different kind of thrill, the quiet, demanding challenge of the wilderness. He was trading the 8-second explosion of a bull ride for the slow, steady rhythm of the seasons. The same wild spirit that drew him to the rodeo was now pulling him toward the mountains. He and Nancy had gotten a taste of Montana during their rodeo days, spending summers there with friends. The huge, rugged landscape just pulled them in. It had a raw beauty and an honesty that spoke to them. So, with the rodeo in the rearview mirror, they made a choice that would change their lives forever. They decided to move to Montana and build a life from scratch. In a perfect symbol of what was to come, they bought a chainsaw in Illinois, planning to use it to build their own log home. They packed everything they owned into an old pickup, a truck Tom bought with money he'd made selling muskrat pelts, a sign of the life that was waiting for them. They headed west, to the remote and isolated Yaak River Valley in the far northwestern corner of Montana, right near the Canadian border. They didn't have a solid plan or any guarantee of success, just a truck full of gear and a deep-seated belief that they could make it work. As Tom put it, "We had no idea what we were getting into or how I was gonna make a living out here. But I just had a feeling that, by God, I can do it. I can get it done." Those first few years were tough, a real test of their will. They bought a small piece of land, just an acre and a half, that came with a tiny, 2-room log cabin. That little cabin was their home while they started the massive job of building their own house. For 5 years, they worked. They cut down trees, peeled the logs, and slowly put their home together, one piece at a time. It was a true labor of love, a testament to their shared dream and good old-fashioned hard work. Life in the Yaak Valley was a completely different world. They were totally off the grid. No electricity, no running water, and the nearest town was miles away down treacherous roads. Survival wasn't a TV show concept, it was their daily reality. They depended completely on the land and their own skills. Tom hunted for their meat, tracking deer and elk through the dense forests. He became an expert trapper, setting lines for beaver, with the pelts bringing in a small but vital income. Nancy was his partner in every way. While Tom was out hunting and trapping, she ran the homestead, tended their garden, preserved food for the long winters, and worked right alongside him. Their partnership was the foundation of their life, a quiet bond built on shared struggles. They were a team, facing down the isolation and challenges of their life together. Tom found an unconventional way to make a living. He had tried tanning hides back in Illinois, but in Montana, he mastered the ancient craft of brain tanning. On a trip to Canada, he saw a piece of moose hide tanned with animal brains and was blown away by how soft and cloth-like it was. He became obsessed with learning how to do it. He taught himself from a simple $3 booklet he found in a shop, learning the incredibly labor-intensive process used by Native Americans for centuries. It was backbreaking work. It involved scraping hides clean, soaking them, and then working the animal's own brains into the skin to soften it, a physically exhausting and messy job. But Tom was dedicated. He perfected his craft, and his brain-tanned buckskin became known for its amazing quality. It was better than any commercial leather, and at Mountain Man Rendezvous, big gatherings of historical reenactors and craftspeople, his work started selling like crazy. He turned the hides into beautiful, functional clothing, moccasins, jackets, and shirts, each one a handmade piece of art. This wasn't just a job, it was his philosophy in action. "The stuff we do is out of the past," he once said. "It's a good feeling of accomplishment to see what I can do with my hands." For more than 30 years, Tom and Nancy lived this life, hidden away in the wilderness. Their world moved with the seasons. The short summers were a mad dash to prepare, a race to stock up on food and chop enough firewood for winter. They had to cut 8 or 9 cords of wood just to stay warm through the brutal Montana cold. Yaak Valley winters were long and harsh, sometimes lasting 7 months, with deep snow and freezing temperatures that could keep them snowed in for weeks. Danger was always around the corner, from grizzly bears to the risk of a simple accident miles from any help. Tom often joked about his place in the world, once saying, "I was born 100 years too late. Or maybe 200 years too late." He felt a real connection to the trappers and explorers of the 1800s, men like Jim Bridger who had walked the same mountains with just their wits and a rifle. In his own way, Tom was living that history, not as an act, but for real. He had found his peace, not because life was easy, but because the struggle had meaning. A sign stood over their home that said it all: "He is free who lives as he chooses." And for many years, Tom Moore was exactly that, truly free. For almost 40 years, Tom and Nancy Orr lived a quiet, private life in the Yaak Valley. Their world was their own, shared only with the wildlife and the few other hardy souls who lived out there. They weren't looking for fame. They were looking for a life with purpose, far away from the modern world. But sooner or later, the modern world has a way of finding you. The way the producers of Mountain Men found Tom was almost a fluke. A person from a film production company happened to know a friend of the Orrs, and an introduction was made. The producers were looking for people who weren't just acting like mountain men, but were actually living the life, day in and day out. In Tom and Nancy, they hit the jackpot. When the show premiered in 2012, it was a massive hit, grabbing millions of viewers with its raw, honest look at life off the grid. The show followed a cast of incredible people, but from the very first episode, Tom Moore stood out. There was a quiet dignity and a realness about him that people connected with instantly. He wasn't loud or dramatic, he didn't play it up for the cameras. He just lived his life, and in doing so, he became the heart and soul of the show. Viewers were captivated by his skills. We watched him expertly set his trap lines in frozen rivers, using fresh-cut willow branches to lure beavers. We saw the intense, back-breaking work that went into his craft, from scraping hides on his workbench to hand-stitching beautiful buckskin clothes. Every episode was like a masterclass in forgotten skills. Tom showed the world the art of tanning, the patience of tracking game, and the planning it took to get ready for a harsh Montana winter. He chopped wood, stocked food, and fixed up his log cabin, all while explaining what he was doing with a calm, grandfatherly charm that made everyone love him. He and Nancy became beloved figures. Their partnership was a huge part of their story, a bond forged through decades of shared struggles and successes. Nancy was his equal, a tough and capable mountain woman herself, and you could feel the deep affection and reliance they had on each other. Together, they represented an ideal, a life boiled down to the essentials, rich with purpose, not stuff. But Tom's popularity came with a new and unexpected problem. He lost the very privacy that drew him to the mountains in the first place. His quiet home became a tourist attraction. As the show got more famous, a steady stream of fans and curious strangers made the long trip out to his property. In just one summer, Tom figured about 300 people showed up at their door, hoping to shake his hand and get a picture. For a man who chose a life of isolation, this was a tough adjustment. He was a kind and humble person, always willing to share a story and a smile, but the constant interruption started to chip away at the peace he and Nancy valued so much. The very thing that made him famous, his authentic, off-grid life, was now being threatened by that fame. Despite the new pressures, Tom stayed on the show for years. He ended up being the cast member with the most appearances, a testament to how popular he was. He wasn't just a reality TV star, he was a teacher and an inspiration. He reminded millions of people about the value of hard work, the beauty of nature, and the deep satisfaction that comes from making something with your own two hands. His financial situation changed, too. The man who once got by selling a few $1,000s worth of buckskin each year was now earning a TV salary, supposedly up to $5,000 an episode. This took some of the pressure off, but the money was never what drove him. Tom's wealth was always measured in freedom. That sign outside his house said, "He is free who lives as he chooses," and for a while, the show let him keep living that way, just under a much bigger spotlight. For a global audience, he was one of the last of a dying breed, a living connection to a past that felt both heroic and impossibly far away. For a man who built his life on being physically strong and unstoppable, the idea of his own body giving out on him just didn't compute. Tom Moore had survived the bone-crushing hits of the rodeo and 40 years of tough labor in the wilderness with barely a word of complaint. He had always been incredibly healthy, which is what made the events of Mountain Men's 11th season so shocking and scary. For him and for everyone watching, the crisis hit without any warning, in the middle of a cold winter night. Tom woke up gasping, unable to breathe. He was choking. The fear was instant and terrifying. For a man who had faced down bears and blizzards, this was a completely new kind of enemy, one that was attacking him from the inside. When Nancy said they needed to get to a hospital, Tom, a man famous for his fierce independence, agreed right away. For Nancy, that was the most alarming sign of all. She knew this was serious. The trip to the hospital was a brutal reminder of the risks of their lifestyle. Their cabin was a staggering 80 miles from the nearest hospital in Libby, Montana. The drive, over winding, snow-covered roads, was an emergency run through the vast, unforgiving wilderness. At the hospital, after a round of tests, the cardiologists gave him the tough news. Tom's heart wasn't working right, it wasn't pumping strongly enough. Because of that, fluid was building up in his lungs, a dangerous condition that explained why he was struggling to breathe. The diagnosis was heart failure. The tough-as-nails mountain man, the rodeo champ who seemed indestructible, was suddenly facing his own mortality. The doctors acted fast. They gave him medication to help his heart and had him wear a heart rate monitor so they could track his condition from afar. But the most shocking thing was the defibrillator vest they sent him home with. This device, worn under his clothes, was designed to detect a sudden cardiac arrest and shock his heart back into rhythm. It was a high-tech safety net, a constant, sobering reminder that his health was fragile, and that an ambulance was hours, not minutes, away. This health scare was a major turning point in Tom's life. It completely shattered the image of him as invincible. The physical work of his lifestyle, once a source of pride, now carried a new, heavy risk. Simple chores he'd done for decades without thinking, like chopping wood or checking a trap line in deep snow, were now dangerous. The whole ordeal was shown in season 11, in an episode fittingly titled Heart and Soul. Viewers saw a side of Tom they'd never seen before, a man forced to face his own limits, his face a mix of worry and quiet defiance. He once joked, "I keep telling Nancy, one of these days you'll probably just find me stretched out dead over the fleshing block." What once sounded like a dark joke now felt frighteningly real. His relationship with Nancy changed, too. She became his rock, his caregiver, his protector. Already in her 70s, Nancy took on even more of the hard work, her steady hands managing the homestead while Tom had to slow down. His willingness to admit his weakness and rely on her strength touched viewers, who flooded social media with messages of support. This crisis didn't just threaten his life, it threatened his whole identity. Being a mountain man meant being self-sufficient, being strong. Now, Tom was dependent on medicine, on a machine, and on his wife. It was a harsh reality check on aging in a place that doesn't care how old you are. Yet, even as he faced this new battle, his spirit didn't break. He was determined to keep doing what he loved for as long as he could. But as he struggled with his failing health, he was already carrying the weight of a much deeper, more private sorrow, a tragedy that had hit years earlier and had quietly changed his world forever. Back in 1970, Tom Moore was dragged, unconscious, by a bull named Woolly Bugger. For years, that was the closest he'd ever come to death, a testament to his toughness. But that wasn't his worst day. The deepest, most heartbreaking tragedy of his life didn't happen in a rodeo arena or in the wild. It came quietly, on April 26, 2015, with a phone call that would shatter his world in a way no physical injury ever could. His daughter, Keely Orr, had passed away. She was only 49 years old. Keely was Tom's daughter from his first marriage to Janice Fraser, and she lived in St. Petersburg, Florida, thousands of miles from the Montana cabin her father called home. The huge distance between them suddenly felt like an uncrossable canyon of grief. The isolation that Tom had chosen for peace and freedom now felt like a cruel wall that had cut him off from his daughter in her final days. The details around Keely's death have been kept very private by the Orr family, who chose to grieve far from the public eye. What we know is that she had been fighting a long illness. Tom has never spoken publicly about what she was battling, and that silence says everything about the depth of his pain. For a man who openly talked about the life and death challenges of the wild, this one topic was off limits, a wound too deep to show the world. Keely's death was a huge blow to the whole family. She was more than just Tom's daughter, she had built a successful herself, with a career in medical sales and a strong Christian faith. Her obituary paints a picture of a woman who was deeply loved, survived by her parents, Tom and Janice, her brothers, Chad Orr and Matt Fraser, her grandmother, and a tight-knit circle of family and friends. The tragedy was made even harder by the timing. Keely was born on February 14, 1966, Valentine's Day. She passed away just 2 months after her 49th birthday, a cruel twist that made the loss feel even sharper. For Tom, dealing with this unimaginable grief while being a public figure was another layer of pain. He was the stoic mountain man, the symbol of resilience that millions looked up to. But behind that tough exterior was a father going through the most devastating experience a person can face, losing a child. The very lifestyle that made him a hero to so many now became a source of deep regret. He was out in the wilderness, living life his way, but he wasn't there for his daughter's final fight. He gave no interviews, posted no tributes. He just grieved, in the quiet, solitary way he knew. The weight of this loss, though mostly invisible to his TV audience, clearly shaped the years that followed. It cast a long shadow over the Orr family, a private sorrow they carried even as the cameras kept rolling. It changes how you see him. The image of the strong, silent mountain man takes on a new, more painful meaning when you realize his silence wasn't just his personality, it was a shield for a broken heart. His son, Chad Orr, shows the family's resilience. Instead of following his dad into the wilderness, Chad carved out his own life in the warmth of Florida. In Ocala, known as the horse capital of the world, he and his wife, Kim, run Kimberton, a huge 56-acre horse training center. They run a large lesson program, host equestrian teams, and even have a horse-drawn carriage business. Chad's life is a different kind of legacy. One that honors the family's deep connection to horses, but in a way that embraces community instead of isolation. Tom's first wife and the mother of his children, Janice, also faced her own struggles. After her marriage to Tom ended, she remarried and was with her second husband for 22 years before she passed away in 2018. The loss of Keeley remains the central tragedy of Tom Orr's life. It's the unspoken pain behind his quiet eyes, the deep sorrow that no amount of survival skill could ever fix. It adds a heartbreaking depth to his story, revealing that the greatest challenges he ever faced didn't come from bears or blizzards, but from the silent, internal battles of love, loss, and regret. As if dealing with a private, devastating loss and a public health crisis wasn't enough, Tom Orr had to face another bizarre and disturbing side effect of his fame: his own death. Not his real death, but a relentless cycle of rumors and fake news that repeatedly declared him dead to the world. The biggest hoax happened in 2020, when a well-written but completely fake obituary started making the rounds online. The post was detailed and believable, and it spread like wildfire on social media. Fans, thinking it was real, started sharing it, and the internet was soon flooded with heartfelt tributes to the man they admired. For a while, a lot of people were convinced the legendary mountain man was really gone. The fact that neither Tom, who isn't on social media, nor the show's producers said anything right away just added fuel to the fire. With no official word, the rumors grew and became accepted as fact by a huge part of his fanbase, and this wasn't a one-time thing. Whispers about Tom's death have been a recurring problem for years, driven by a few key things. His age, now in his 80s, naturally makes people worry. On top of that, his reduced screen time on Mountain Men in the later seasons made many fans assume the worst. When he wasn't on the show for long stretches, people often figured it was because his health was failing, or that he had already passed away, especially after his on-screen health scare gave the rumors a ring of truth. The rumors have been persistent and specific. Some sources have even claimed he passed away as recently as 2024 in Florida. These reports, however, are not backed up by any reliable sources and are contradicted by recent updates confirming that as of mid-2025, Tom Orr is very much alive. He's managing his health conditions and living his life, just with a much lower public profile. The way he lived his life also added to the confusion. Many fans didn't know that Tom and Nancy didn't spend the entire year in the harsh Montana winter. After filming, the couple would often travel to the warmer weather of Florida to be with family, a pattern that could easily be mistaken for a permanent move, or something more final. Living so remotely, with almost no contact with the outside world, made it hard to shut these rumors down quickly. Tom and Nancy don't have internet or reliable cell service at their Montana home, which created a delay between the fake news spreading and the truth getting out. The very isolation that made him a star also made him an easy target for this kind of morbid gossip. For Tom and his family, these repeated death hoaxes must have been deeply frustrating. It's one thing to face your own mortality, it's another to have it debated publicly and falsely by strangers. It's a cruel and unusual burden, a ghost of fame that has haunted his later years, adding another layer of struggle to a life already marked by tragedy and personal challenges. Every story has a final chapter, and for a man who lived a life as big as Tom Orr's, the last few pages are about reflection, change, and a quiet acceptance that time marches on. The question of his retirement from the hard life of a mountain man was no longer a matter of if, but when. For years, his kids had been gently pushing him to think about an easier life, to move closer to them in Florida where every day wasn't a battle for